Morning, FBI agents paid a visit to the home of the chairman. The question tonight, will he be charged in connection to the ongoing investigation into a multi-million-dollar bribery scandal that led to a taxpayer bailout?
I don't think this is a surprise to anyone who's been following this scandal.
This story begins with a footnote, a small one. The kind of thing nobody is supposed to find interesting. It was a footnote on page 11 of a routine state procurement audit summary, sitting at the bottom of a column of numbers that almost nobody at the state capitol had any reason to read carefully. Her name was Diana Whitford. She was 29 years old, a junior auditor at the state procurement office. On a Wednesday morning in early November, she was working through a routine review of border infrastructure procurement filings. The state had been investing heavily in border surveillance technology over the previous 8 years. Camera systems, radar arrays, drone fleet operations, thermal imaging infrastructure, mobile sensor networks. Most of the procurement had been routed through a state-level office called the Border Security Modernization Initiative, which reported directly to the governor's senior policy advisor for border affairs. Diana was reviewing one specific procurement filing, a $14.6 million purchase order for a deployment of mobile thermal imaging units across a stretch of the southern border in deep South Texas. The subcontract value was $4.8 million. That number by itself was not unusual. What caught Diana's attention was the corporate name of the subcontractor. She had seen that corporate name before, 3 days earlier, in a completely different procurement filing. A $9.2 million purchase order for radar array maintenance in a separate sector of the southern border, routed through a separate purchase order, awarded through a separate competitive bidding process. The same corporate entity had won both subcontracts. Diana pulled the corporate registration for the entity. It had been incorporated 4 years earlier in Delaware. It had no website. It had no listed staff. Its registered agent was a corporate formation service in Wilmington, Delaware. Diana pulled the previous 3 years of border surveillance technology maintenance and calibration subcontract awards across the entire state. The same corporate entity had won 84% of those subcontracts across 31 separate purchase orders, totaling approximately $186 million in subcontract value over 3 years. A Delaware corporate entity with no website, no staff, and no public footprint had been quietly awarded the maintenance and calibration work on nearly the entire state's border surveillance technology infrastructure. Diana Whitford did not call the FBI on her first day of suspicion. She did what good auditors do. She started documenting. If you believe corruption like this should be brought into the light, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and comment exposed below. It took Diana 6 weeks to assemble what she eventually walked into her senior auditor's office in mid-December. What she had assembled was a structural picture of a procurement pattern that should not have existed. A single-shell corporate entity awarded maintenance and calibration subcontracts on a substantial majority of the state's border surveillance technology infrastructure. The subcontract awards routed through the office of the governor's senior policy advisor for border affairs. The Delaware corporate entity itself with no operational footprint that could be verified through any public record. The senior auditor read the memorandum twice. She forwarded it to the state inspector general's office that same afternoon. By the end of the week, it had been forwarded to the FBI's San Antonio field office. By the end of December, the FBI had quietly looped in U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement because the border surveillance technology in question was integrated with federal border enforcement systems, and the contract steering pattern suggested potential federal jurisdictional issues. By early January, the federal investigation that would become one of the largest public corruption cases in the state's border infrastructure history was quietly underway. It would take 13 months to bring the case to the point where federal agents could execute the raid that ended it. The story underneath the footnote was not really about the maintenance and calibration subcontracts. The subcontracts were just the surface. The story was about what the maintenance and calibration access had been used for. For 8 years, the state's border surveillance technology infrastructure had been quietly providing real-time territory mapping information to a major cartel logistics organization operating across the southern border region. The combined infrastructure was supposed to give state and federal border enforcement agencies a continuous picture of what was happening along hundreds of miles of border terrain. It was, by every public account, a major investment in border security. The cartel logistics organization knew, with continuously updated precision, where every camera was pointed, where every radar array's coverage gaps were located, where every drone's standard patrol patterns ran, where every mobile sensor was currently deployed, and which sections of the border were, at any given hour of any given day, effectively unmonitored. The second thing it had done was quietly recalibrate certain surveillance elements during routine maintenance windows to create permanent operational gaps in specific high-value transit corridors. Thermal imaging units that, on paper, were fully functional but, in practice, had been recalibrated to miss heat signatures at specific. The combined operational value of this surveillance infrastructure manipulation, calculated across the 8-year window, and the volume of cartel logistics that had moved through the corridors it created, came out to approximately $1.8 billion. A portion of that value had flowed back to the governor's senior policy advisor for border affairs and to several officials operating beneath him through a layered network of shell companies, offshore consolidation accounts, and physical cash transfers. The physical cash transfers had been accumulating at the senior policy advisor's private ranch in the Texas Hill Country, in a hidden office beneath the main horse stable. The senior policy advisor was a man named Howard Beckworth, 58 years old, 23-year political operative, former state representative, former chief of staff to 2 previous state-level executives before being appointed to his current role 9 years earlier. The kind of senior advisor who was widely understood in the state capitol to operate as a shadow co-governor on matters relating to border affairs, infrastructure procurement, and federal-state coordination. His authorization signature appeared on every one of the steered subcontract awards. His office had been the routing point for the entire surveillance technology procurement strategy. His staff had personally coordinated the field inspection certifications that had cleared the cartel-affiliated subcontractors' work as legitimate maintenance. But Beckworth had not designed the operation. He had implemented it. The architecture, the system that had allowed 8 years of border surveillance infrastructure manipulation to proceed without triggering a single federal investigation, had been built by someone with deep prior federal experience. His name was Curtis Plenrose, 64 years old, former Assistant Director for Border Surveillance Technology Operations at U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Before that, 16 years as a Senior Policy Advisor at the Department of Homeland Security on Integrated Border Monitoring Infrastructure. Before that, 11 years as a CBP Field Operations Officer at multiple southern border surveillance facilities across Texas, Arizona, and California. Curtis Plenrose had spent over 27 years on the federal side of the border surveillance system. He had personally written significant portions of the operational protocols that governed how surveillance technology was procured, deployed, maintained, calibrated, and audited by federal and state agencies. He had served on the federal review committees that had established the very subcontract oversight thresholds that the cartel-affiliated entity had been operating beneath. Inside the encrypted communications archive that investigators eventually recovered, Plenrose's codename was the Watchtower. A message in the archive, written 4 years into the operation, read, "Border surveillance technology is audited by reviewing its uptime, its calibration certifications, and its operational reports. None of those audits verify that the technology is actually detecting what it is supposed to detect. We do not break the technology. We adjust the parameters of what the technology considers worth detecting. The audits all return clean." Howard Beckworth held the procurement authority. Curtis Plenrose had built the system that allowed 8 years of border surveillance manipulation to remain invisible to every audit, every review, and every oversight protocol that the state and federal governments had ever designed to catch exactly this kind of corruption. Until a 29-year-old junior auditor noticed that a Delaware shell company had won 84% of the state's border surveillance maintenance subcontracts. The raid happened on a Tuesday morning at the senior policy advisor's private ranch in the Texas Hill Country. At 5:32 a.m. on a Tuesday in late January, a federal judge in the Western District of Texas signed simultaneous search and arrest warrants for 16 locations across Texas. At 6:04 a.m., the order went out. Execute. The dawn timing was deliberate. Howard Beckworth was at the ranch that morning. He had a public schedule clear until a state legislative breakfast scheduled for 11 o'clock at the state capitol. The ranch's private security rotation was at its weakest in the hour after dawn. The property's distant location from any major road meant that federal vehicles approaching through the ranch's private access road would not be observed by anyone outside the operation until the breach team was already at the main residence. FBI and ICE tactical teams approached the property through the main access gate and through a secondary tactical entry point along the eastern fence line. The ranch's private security personnel were secured without incident. Federal agents entered the main residence at 6:24 a.m. Howard Beckworth was inside the residence. He was awake, drinking coffee at the kitchen counter. He did not resist. He asked once whether his attorney had been notified. He was told that his attorney would be contacted through the appropriate federal protocol. Federal engineering teams then proceeded to the main horse stable, which the investigation had mapped extensively during the preceding 13 months through subpoenaed construction records, utility records, and federal surveillance. Beneath the stable's primary tack room, behind a concealed hydraulic locking concrete panel that had been built into the stable's foundation 7 years earlier, agents accessed the hidden office. The hidden office was approximately 640 square feet of finished, climate-controlled subterranean space. Inside, agents recovered the following: approximately $42 million in U.S. currency, banded and shrink-wrapped in commercial bank packaging, approximately 68 kilograms of gold bullion, a leather-bound coordination ledger documenting every border surveillance manipulation decision made across the 8-year window, the corresponding cartel-side payment record for each manipulation, offshore banking documentation tied to accounts in the Cayman Islands, Panama, and the Bahamas, an encrypted workstation with active connections to the cartel-affiliated subcontractors' operational network, and a smaller hidden compartment containing 4 foreign passports, 3 in different names, for Beckworth and members of his immediate family: Howard Beckworth, Curtis Plenrose, 6 senior policy office staff members, 4 state border infrastructure procurement officials, 2 field inspection officers, 5 senior staff members across 3 of the shell company contractor entities, assets frozen domestically, $620 million, offshore accounts flagged through international cooperation agreements, an additional $590 million under active legal proceedings. The Cayman Islands, Panama, and Bahamas consolidation accounts remained under formal recovery proceedings. Roles ranged from operational logistics within the cartel network to coordination of the physical cash transfers that had filled the hidden office beneath the stable. The state announced an immediate operational audit of border infrastructure procurement decision-making protocols across all surveillance technology contracts active over the previous 10 years. The Department of Homeland Security announced a parallel federal review of state-level border surveillance integration protocols across every state operating shared monitoring infrastructure with federal agencies. I want to come back to Diana Whitford, because there is something about how this case actually broke that I think gets lost when you look at the dollar amounts. The case did not break because of federal counter-cartel intelligence. It did not break because of Border Patrol surveillance. It did not break because of investigative journalism into the senior policy advisor's office. It did not break because of any of the major institutional systems that the public believes are responsible for catching public corruption at this scale. It broke because a 29-year-old junior auditor read a footnote on page 11 of a procurement summary carefully enough to notice that the corporate name in the footnote was the same as the corporate name she had seen 3 days earlier in a completely unrelated filing. She did not have to notice. She did not have to pull the cross-references. She did not have to spend 6 weeks quietly building the structural memorandum that walked into her senior auditor's office in mid-December. She did not have to spend the following 13 months cooperating with federal investigators while the case was built around her observation. She did all of it because that was the kind of auditor she was deciding to become. The operation had been running for 8 years before Diana flagged the Delaware Shell Company. It had survived 8 years of state procurement audits, federal infrastructure reviews, integrated border surveillance certifications, and the careful architecture of a former senior CBP official who had spent 27 years building the very oversight framework he was now quietly running operations against. It did not survive a junior auditor who had decided, 3.5 years into a job nobody at family dinners ever asked her about, that she was going to read the footnotes. If a corruption network this large could operate for 8 years through one of the most heavily monitored sectors of American border infrastructure, manipulating $1.8 billion worth of cartel logistics value through state surveillance technology, while every formal oversight mechanism functioned as designed. How many other footnotes are sitting on page 11 of procurement summaries tonight, waiting for someone like Diana Whitford to read them carefully enough to notice that the same shell company name appears in two unrelated filings, and that the federal system has no idea?